Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplant Goodness, and this essentially is a place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see behind me. It's tropical houseplants. Now, as a new YouTube content creator, it does really help if you guys give me feedback in terms of if you're liking this video. Generally, a like on the video down below will let me know if you like it, and if you like generally content like this, do consider subscribing down below as well, because once a week, or actually every week, I'll bring out 2 or 3 videos like this or on topics like this, so hopefully you can enjoy. Now, without further ado, this is probably going to be a bit of a longer video, but it's that lovely time of the year and there's a lot of people asking questions, so I thought I'd do kind of my way of doing it, pest control, and kind of from things that I've learned from my experiences. Hopefully this might be something that could help people out. So, diving into the first thing, I'm going to go through all the pests that I've experienced and what I have learned, what I use, and different options that I use in order to treat those pests. And let's start with the first type of pest, and that is the standard Mealy Bug. If I find images, I will add them here. If not, then a Mealy Bug essentially is a bug that looks a bit like cotton wool, and it's very, very slow moving, so it's very, very difficult for you to get a full-blown infestation unless you've really neglected that plant. And even then, a lot of the times you can kind of bring it back from the brink, essentially. Now, this is one of the easiest ones. I always have a handy dandy little spray bottle with rubbing alcohol in it, and if you spray it directly onto the mealy bugs themselves, both the mature ones with a bit more fluff and the ones that haven't got the fluff yet, it's very satisfying. Out of all the methods, this is really satisfying. And essentially, it melts them away. It's glorious. Slightly sadistic there, but I've been dealing with pets for a very long period of time, so things like that give me a bit of joy at this point in time. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, and I cannot remember the Latin name of a predatory insect that annoyingly, and I'll try to put the name up here, but annoyingly that predatory insect that you can purchase and put it on your plants and it will eat away at any mealybugs that are on the plant. The problem with those predatory insects, even more so than other predatory insects, is it looks very similar to its prey. So it's, and if you are going to use that specific predatory insect for mealybugs, I do encourage you to have a look online, go onto Google and look at predators for mealybugs, and you'll see the differences. You'll see a lot of pictures that have got them next to each other. The mealybug is nice and fluffy and cottony. The predator is slightly spiky, still a bit fluffy, but you'll see what I mean if you go and have a look at it. So that's the more biological and less chemical way of doing it. Moving on to a different type of pests. So the different type of pests I don't actually have pre-prepared, but this is aphids. So aphids are small little green or sometimes dark black bugs that essentially surround the stem and they suck out the sugars, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from the stem itself. And generally you'll probably be able to see quite a few of them around that stem and attacking that stem. And if you don't, you'll probably, one of the first indicators is you'll see that sometimes the stems or the leaves are a bit sticky. And that is the frass or the poo of the aphids, which essentially are pooping out a sugary liquid. I think it's called, I can't remember now, it could be nectar or something like that, but if I remember the name, I'll put it up on the top there. And that's another thing as well. And also something to bear in mind, if you also start seeing ants really quickly happening on your plants and they are covering your plants, the ants will eat that honeydew. That's it. That's what I think it's called, honeydew, the aphid poo. So it's quite sugary. The ants will eat that sugary substance, which then in turn will mean that they will protect the aphids from any form of attack, because obviously they're providing its food source. So something to bear in mind. But aphids are relatively straightforward to deal with. I was really worried about this when I was a new plant parent quite a few years back now, thinking, oh my God, this is going to destroy my plant. But essentially you just want to add a few drops of washing up liquid. In the UK it could be fairy liquid if you've got it. In the States I think something a bit more gentle like Dawn. I think it's Dawn dish soap. Not entirely sure, but that's what I keep hearing other American YouTubers talk about. But in the UK we've also got things like, I use Ecover, which is a slightly more biological washing up liquid, just to it still does the same thing, but I somehow think that that is probably a bit less chemically. Not entirely sure, probably going to be wrong. If somebody knows, do correct me down below. But add a bit of that into some water, into a spray bottle, and then douse the plant, douse the area that you've got the aphids. And as you will see with most of these, essentially with these pests, and actually this is across the board, even with mealy bugs, you'd kind of want to check again in a couple of weeks' time and retreat as and when needed. Because a lot of the times, the one thing you need to remember about pests is they've got a life cycle as well. So you might be killing off the adult pests, but the younger, kind of the larval stage of a lot of these pests, you might not even be able to see, and they will usually sprout out a couple of weeks later. So you definitely want to like retreat a couple of weeks later with most of these pests. So that's what you do. You douse them in that soapy water, and that is pretty much it. They'll start kind of dissolving relatively quickly. I've never had any issues with this. Obviously, with any of these methods that I'm saying now, try, because some plants are slightly more sensitive. I'm thinking about my Stephania erecta. I sprayed it with something the other day and it lost all of its leaves. It took a very long time to get. So do check on one of the leaves first and give it a couple of days to see if there's any adverse reaction, and then treat the whole plant essentially if there's no reaction. So that's aphids. I think with aphids as well, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of predatory insects, you can use lacewings, if I'm not mistaken, and also ladybugs if you want to buy them. So that's another predatory insect route that you want to go in. And something you'll see throughout this video, some of the techniques that I'm using are chemical, some of them are a bit more biological, and some of them are predatory insects. So I'll talk about all of these things and tell you about my experiences. When it comes to aphids, I've never used predatory insects, so I don't know how well they perform. With the mealy bugs, the mealy bug predators were okay. I don't know if I'm going to be trying it again. They weren't as impressive to me as spidermite predatory insects, but we'll come on to that in a minute. And actually, nice segue, let's go into spidermites. The thing that I would normally do for spidermites is a few things. I've got another video, if I'm not mistaken, on here, which is very heavily informed by Rachel from Heart Shaped Leaves video, where I talk about using the mixture that I'm going to talk about now, but it's also got a makeup brush, and it's a bit more mechanical, trying to really disrupt those spider mites from the leaves. But I use a slightly more natural way of doing it. So a very, very janky bottle, but this is neem oil. And with neem oil, I would put it into a spray container, and this is the order that I do it as well. Warm water for most of it, then a couple of drops of a dish soap, so Dawn or Ecover or Fairy Liquid, and then you add a few drops in of the neem oil. And by a few drops, I know this was annoying when I was checking it out as well, but I can't really tell you. It depends on your spray bottle. If you've got a small spray bottle like this, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 drops. If you've got a larger spray bottle, then add twice that. I don't know. You'll kind of figure it out. Don't add the whole bottle, obviously, is what I'm saying. Probably you want to max out maybe a teaspoon. So no more than that, really. And then what you would do, it needs to be warm water, by the way, not cool water. It needs to be warm water. I'm going to shake it up because essentially the soap will also emulsify the oil into the water as well. One thing I will say, if you've never experienced neem, it stinks. It really does not smell nice. I've been using it for a couple of years now. To say I've got used to it is probably the best praise that I can give it. I still find it horrible in terms of smell, but I don't find it quite as offensively stanking of feet as I did before. So just bear that in mind. If you've got a sensitive sense of smell, see if somebody else that you've got, a friend or somebody like that, is using it like this, and try smelling it and see if you can stomach the smell, because it's not for everybody. But it does work quite well, and as I said, there is another video that I've got on how I remove the mealy bug. So if you don't want to use the makeup brush side of things, you just spray the whole thing down, so the underside of the leaves, the top side of the leaves, the stems, all the nooks and crannies where you would get the spider mites hiding in. Another thing that you can do, and I've done this for some of the bigger plants, generally I will do it when it's much warmer days, because obviously in the UK it's quite cold most of the time. But I've got a hose. I can also get a jet stream and spray the leaves entirely on the front and the back, and that will usually knock off most of the spider mites. But as with anything like this, you want to reapply in a couple of weeks' time, and maybe if it's still there, then 2 weeks after that, and just keep going until you see the infestation is kind of cleared. Neem oil generally, and most of these more organic ways of getting rid of pests, take a bit longer, and it's a bit more hard graft. But if that's the way you want to go and you don't want to go down the chemical route, by all means fill your boots, and it's what I've always used. The other thing is predatory mites for the Spidermites, and again, really long Latin names. If I can find them, I'll add them on here. There's a couple of different ones, and I think I've used both. One that comes in a satchel and it's slow release, but that's to deal with preemptively, and if you've only got a few Spidermites, they will kind of go and eat those Spidermites essentially, and this does work like a charm. I use it preemptively, and I'll buy these satchels. Usually come in packets of 5, 10, 20. I usually buy 20 or even 40 because I've got so many plants, and I hang them. They've got little hangers that you put them on the plants at the beginning of the summer preemptively, and it generally means that I don't have to deal with, it doesn't completely wipe out me having to deal with spider mites, but it does considerably reduce the spider mites that I kind of have to treat after that as well. The other insect, which is slightly small and red, and it does look like a spider mite, but it's bright red, is one that you usually get bigger containers on in a media that you just shake over the leaves, and that's when you've already got an infestation, because that will start working a lot faster. Both of those methods work really, really well, and I think that's everything for spider mites that I can think of for right now. Yes, there's usually the advice of trying to isolate your plants, make sure that it doesn't touch, and a lot of these pests, barring a couple, you just generally want to make sure that you're not getting strong gusts of wind to knock some of these bugs onto neighboring plants, and plants aren't touching leaves or stems or anything like that, because that creates a bridge for the bugs, the pests, to go from one plant to the other. Just bear that in mind. Yes, if you've got the luxury of being able to isolate the plant and quarantine it, do. I've got way too many plants to be able to do that. I don't have any more space that I can actually use just solely to quarantine plants, so that's not really an option for me. I just go in quite strongly with everything that I can to get rid of these pests. Now, the other thing that I will say about the predatory insects on all of these things, if you use things like organic, so neem or anything that's not chemical essentially, and even on the chemical side of pesticides, so for instance, if you're treating it chemically for the mealy bugs or the spider mites, you also want to make sure that if you're putting predatory insects, that you wait at least 2 or 3 weeks after you've treated with the chemicals to do that, because those chemicals or those organic pest controls, guess what? They'll kill the pests. They'll also kill the predators of the pests as well. So you want to give it a bit of time to kind of wear off a bit before you introduce predatory insects, because essentially you're going to spend a lot of money to get these predatory insects, and then eventually they'll die because they're consuming the same harmful substance that the pests are. So probably not what you want to do. Just bear that in mind. Now, the other thing, and this is one that I would have loved to say that I have found a biological way of dealing with them. I haven't really, and I haven't found an organic way of dealing with it. Thrips. Anybody who's had thrips at the moment would be going, oh, no. And I feel you completely. I had thrips. I didn't know they were thrips, and they spread to all my plants. Couldn't really isolate. I did try at that point to isolate. Yeah, it took me over 6 months to kind of get rid of it, and I was treating it consistently. And this is the only thing that I found worked. A lot of biological control, generally, apparently lacewings are ones, and I've tried lacewings a few times. Yes, maybe it worked. It didn't work fast enough for me. I don't know. I've not had the best experiences. I know if you want to know more about lacewings and using predatory insects like that, definitely check out Summer Rain Oaks channel, and I'm not sure if it's called Homestead Brooklyn. I think it might be. She talks a bit more about lacewings. She's had some good success with them. I tried, having seen her videos, and it's okay, but not great for me anyway. So the one thing that I have found works like a charm, and I pre-mixed my own now. You can get liter spray bottles, but I was just going through that too quickly when I had the massive infestation, is Provanto bug killer, and this is a systemic pesticide. And that means a few things. So generally it means that it will kind of saturate into the soil and into stems and into the leaves, if I understand it correctly, and it will keep working for a few days or even a couple of weeks. And again, you want to reapply with this after a couple of weeks, especially for thrips. And the one thing to remember with Provanto is make sure that this is not going into plants that will be going outdoors, because it can spread quite easily to other plants as well, and it could kill off some beneficial insects, things like bees. Now, I don't find it as risky in my own house, because bees will generally not be in my house normally unless they kind of somehow sneak in. But again, one that you want to keep away from kids, you want to keep away from pets as well. I don't know if I mentioned this. I think neem, and I'm not entirely sure, do some of your own research. I think neem might be safe for pets, but definitely check that out. Don't take it as gospel. Generally, with anything that I'm treating, with the exception of maybe the rubbing alcohol, I will kind of move away from pets and anything like that, just so it's kind of a bit more sure that nothing's going to happen, essentially. So with the Provanto, it works like a charm. Do it for like a week, do it, spray it, leave it for a couple of weeks, do another round, maybe then do another one. The one thing I will say about Provanto specifically, and this is where you get some of the mixed reviews, it does work really well, but there is a chance that your thrips might develop tolerance to it, and then you need to find something else to use. Now, I know with Provanto, it does also apparently say that it deals with Meaty Bug, it deals with scale, it deals with whitefly, which are some of the other things that you could potentially. Whitefly I've never had, so I don't know. I'm not going to talk about whitefly. Scale I've never had, so again, I'm not going to talk about scale. Meaty Bug, I've tried it. It didn't work as well as the rubbing alcohol, so something to bear in mind, but it does work exceptionally well. And the last one I don't actually have in front of me to show you, and that is the scariad flies, and that is fungus gnats. So it's the little flies that will be flying around your plant. Usually happens when you're overwatering. One of the things that you can do to reduce this, if you can, you might not be able to do this, especially with ferns or calatheas that need to be a bit more moist all the time, is let that couple of inches of the soil dry at the top. And I know there's other methods with diatomaceous earth and some of these things. I've never tried them. I've heard in America there's things like mosquito bits, which works like a charm. I don't think we can get them in the UK. I've not found them, and if I have, I think they've been stupidly expensive for what it is. But generally, the thing that I have found works best is the yellow sticky traps to basically catch the adult flies, and you need to put that around a lot of the plants that you see these flies buzzing around. You deal with the younger flies, the fungus gnats, is you use nematodes, and that is essentially it's little worms that you will kind of, it comes in, it doesn't look like worms, it looks like almost a bit like yeasty powder, if that makes sense. You can leave it in the fridge for a day or two, but you pretty much want to use it quite quickly. You mix it with water. I'm not going to go into instructions on how to do it. Most places that you can buy these nematodes will have instructions. I got mine on Amazon. I will try to link all of these products down below where I got them from Amazon, so you can see what I've used. You mix it with water, and pretty much at that point you will have to water all of your plants. And what it does is it goes into the soil, and those little worms, they're like parasites for the, I think the adults as well, but mainly the juvenile fungus gnats, and they will eat them from the inside out. Again, it's slightly sadistic, but if you've been dealing with a lot of those flies flying up your nose, this is one way of doing it. And ironically enough, this is biological control. This is something that they would probably find in nature, probably not in this concentration, and it wouldn't wipe them all out at the same time. But generally speaking, nematodes are something that I will use once a year religiously. When I start seeing getting some fungus gnats, I will just water it once, and it pretty much deals with it for that year. I might have to do it again next summer, but that is everything I think I wanted to talk about. Apologies, probably a very, very long video at this point. I did try to go relatively quickly. If you've got any questions, by all means, do drop them in the comments down below. If you do think slightly differently, share that with the group as well. Put it in the comments down below. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks. Bye.